Good morning. So I'm Dave Hudson, and this is Tom Frankie. We're both from the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk, right up the road. I made the jump to the aquarium having both my offer letter and tenure letter in hand 3 years ago, and it was a bit of a plunge, but these guys have been helping me to take that plunge with grace, and they've been quite patient with me as I've gone from, again, being a content expert to trying to figure out how do we really get people excited and inspired to protect the natural environment, study the natural environment, and also to get after some issues when it comes to from very complex concepts. When you have true novices coming through the building, we have sometimes three-week-old kids coming through the building. So we when we sat down to think about this, we settled on one particular area, and we'll get to that in a second. But we're currently undergoing some major physical renovations in our building. So the building itself was 1867 metals factory, and it was converted in 1988 to an aquarium. So there was an initial vision for that space. Some of you have been through it. I know Nick has been by to see it. But we've had to think about this space and how we physically present some pretty complex concepts and so a variety of concepts. So we chose one, and I'll set this over to Tom.
So one of the things we're about is conservation. So we want to give our audience a sense of urgency for the species that we're trying to protect, but we don't want to create a sense of alarm because of the age of a lot of our audience. A lot of our signage aims around 4th to 6th grade reading level, but we try to do that without doing a disservice to the people who come in with doctoral level studies that they're trying to conduct at the aquarium. So we want to really be able to find a way to create that sense of urgency and actually move them to action without creating that sense of alarm, giving them that sort of out. The other thing is the connections that we have to make to everything else that's going on around us. Some of the renovations that we've got going on, we're trying to roll that into the things that are happening within the aquarium so that people don't see what's happening outside as separate, because we think it's important for them to be able to make that same connection to something ecologically that's happening outside the aquarium with something that's happening inside. And then finally, the ultimate question from students, right? Who cares? We know that's going to be the question we get, so we've got to get the answer to that question at least thought about or presented. And we do that by connecting relevancy to everyday situations. So if we can take the plight of some species of fish or coral and connect that to maybe a human health issue or a family dynamic or something that can make it concrete, we can get some buy-in. And then these are serious topics, but we have to have fun too, because people aren't coming to a place like an aquarium to leave depressed and concerned for the environment. So we want to make sure that we address those things. So in talking with Dave, one of the things that came up right away was climate change. We're an aquarium. We're located on a river that's right on the harbor of Long Island Sound. And the people in the neighborhood are seeing climate change literally in their backyards. So we need to address that as an institution. But just in the anecdotal research that you would do walking through the aquarium, people don't understand the difference between the climate and the weather. So we said, okay, we have to get very, very basic and go back to that prime thing, because any kind of misconception in science is almost that much more dangerous, because things keep building on that misconception. So we present coastal risks. Sea level rise are the two obvious things that people are actually witnessing in that neighborhood outside the aquarium. So let's talk about that inside as well. Certain parts of the country, it's a very challenging topic. We're kind of lucky to be here in the Northeast, where it's something that we discuss. But we deal with teachers every day from other parts of the country who have almost zero resources. Textbook companies are eliminating it out of their curriculums. They don't know who to trust. Where do I get good information? So we're dealing with that. And then signage and messaging, we're competing with our living animals. The reason people are coming to the aquarium is to see the fish, see the live animals, right? Our seal pool is one of our more popular animals, the otters, that kind of thing. So how do I get them to look at my sign or my video display if there's an otter, spinning around doing tricks? So we're competing with that animal. Our research shows we have about 11 seconds to do whatever we're going to do. And that seems like a really, really short time. But think about any visit that you had to a zoo or an aquarium. You kind of look in the tank, you see what's there. Maybe you glance at a sign or some messaging, and then you move on to the next thing, because there's always more to see. So we have to figure out a way to either get our message across in 11 seconds or get them to stay there longer. So that's kind of been our challenge. How do we kind of marry those two? You can speak more to what actually happens on the boat. So why don't you talk about the resilience?
So we, as part of a NOAA grant that we had to get after really educating about coastal resiliency, climate change, and the effects on our immediate vicinity, we were tasked with, one, improving our exhibitry around this idea, but also we've been getting folks from K through 12 institutions out on our research vessel. We have a 64-foot research vessel that takes folks out for 2 to 3 hour excursions. We have a variety of programs we run on it. And we've primarily focused on folks who would never end up getting on the water. So in the Northeast, you do have a lot of private land ownership. That means that some folks never see, they could live in a coastal town and never see the ocean, really, or never experience nature, even in this location. So we've really focused in on demographics and locations in our immediate vicinity that have that profound need. And to do that, we've given them a different view of their coastline. So we take them out and we've mapped these different areas and look at what assets are likely to end up getting inundated by sea level rise, a power plant, a park, places where they spend actual time. And they are able to then start to better understand that spatially, because we all experience things in a spatial manner. So we have these individualized maps based on the town, and we're able to have them actually experience them. We've gotten we had 210 cruises, I think, when all was said and done. So it's a really incredible experience. Going into the NOAA exhibit side, we really wanted to start with this climate change as a concept, but the space prior to the renovation was a bit wanting. So this is we used to call it the donut because it was shaped like a Homer Simpson half-eaten donut. And it's kind of a millabout space. So as much as people are either enter the exhibits through this space or they are kind of spit out at the end of their visit, it just ends up being this millabout space, and there was a time when we really thought that we would get maybe more than 11 seconds. And to do that, to really start to get after that, we had a really great scientist and photographer, Galen Rosenwax, who's a member of the Explorers Club right here in the city, and she had some really incredible photos from some of her expeditions, and we started with just some really striking photos as we were trying to start to visualize the change to this space. So it was a transition from, okay, this is a millabout space, to a space where we can start to communicate something about what's going on in our external environment. So from this point, we conceptualized something that looked entirely different. So we took down walls. Is that a load-bearing wall? Pound through it. It turns out it's not. It turns out it wasn't. So we were able to really open this up, and it's kind of the open concept kitchen thing, right? So, hey, we don't have to have that. So what that allowed us to do is to really, one, visualize animals next to each other and start to have this space be a little bit more inviting, not just hey, I'm waiting for the bathroom, or I'm waiting for someone in the bathroom, and really tried to start to use it a little bit more. So to that end, we built this wraparound where we are able to, one, have an interaction portion to it, so we're able to use some of NOAA's online assets, looking at sea level rise, so you can look down to your specific area. But we also have this map, and it really grew out of some recent work that's been done in the state of Connecticut to start to map all of the different uses of Long Island Sound. We're moving along with this with the state of New York as well to really have a good map of these locations. So that's the case of incomplete data. But we're starting to, what's nice about this being a projected screen is we're able to constantly update this. And we do have some aspects of it that are updated yearly or even monthly. And what we found is that people are using the space. So this is one of our educators utilizing this. But what really comes down to is the product here is the product of 20 or 25 really intelligent, broad-based professionals getting together and figuring out what things do we need to do pedagogically to get these ideas across, what do we need to do from a design standpoint, what do I think of with the content, and where can we find some really good data to be able to help visualize this. So we settled on this because maps really, everybody's got a map right in their pocket probably with Google Maps, and it's something that's inherent. We have this spatial compass, and we really thought that this is a great way for people to help visualize, in this case, climate science. So visualizing in the place where you're from. And we're able to view some of the resources at risk, some of the uses that, oh wow, I didn't even know that was there. And what we're trying to do is start to get some crosstalk between those of us with the scientific and the ecological interests, what's going on with invasive species, changes in species distributions, to somebody who has a purely economic interest in shipping in the sound, to someone who's a sailor. They may have a strictly recreational use. They have no interest in there being kelp aquaculture in the sound. It's gonna help us make us run aground, et cetera, et cetera. I've actually run into a number of sailors who have had that reaction to the fact that this could be something that turns around what we see from a nutrient profile in Long Island Sound and improve the water quality. So when it comes down to this, we're able to start to marry those three interests, which is also something that the Connecticut Blue Plan, which is this plan I was mentioning, has attempted to do in its first iteration. We're kind of in a beta version. So the Connecticut DEP brought a lot of groups together and made some imperfect maps, but we're already able to use those to look for data gaps, look for ways that we can improve it, and look for ways that we're able to help people make better decisions about where we do these different activities, whether it's building a nuclear submarine or having a container ship come in. So this is a small piece of the presentation itself that cycles through in this space, and we are really thankful to both Avalon Bunge and Dr. Emily Shubchenia for having put together the maps and these graphics. So what we're able to do here is really bring people back to, okay, and I think all of you figured out where we are, but that's the first piece. When we talked about this, the first thing people go, oh, that's my house. So you really have to get past that before you can really get to the meat of some of the issues with the data. So as we go through, we find our favorite place, and we start people with, we're here at the aquarium in Norwalk, Connecticut, and here are the other places that you may have heard of. So we talk about how the sound is an estuary. Some people don't think about how the sound is actually a drowned riverbed. And it was formed by glaciers. And we were able to start to get just some really introductory knowledge bits about this. My dad, having grown up in Connecticut, I'm a Midwestern boy, but I had no idea where some of these places were. And now that I'm working and living in and doing science in these places, it's really something that I'm finding that as I interact with people, they have some real connection to some of these locations. So we're really trying to bring forward that spatial piece and understanding that there are inputs from saltwater and freshwater, and there's mixing that's different in different parts of the sound. We have over 25 million people within 50 miles of the sound. So this is a piece that really helps them to then connect with other people. When it comes down to it, the aquarium is really a great organization to serve as glue between different organizations, between different types of organizations. We're here to empower people to take data and use it in a real way. And it always comes back to people, because when we're talking about health, wealth, well-being, quality of life, those are the key pieces that we as conservationists and me as a benthic ecologist are trying to convey. To this end, we talk a lot about what people are doing around these different places. So we talk about, that we've got some beaches, we've got surface water activities like sailing and other recreation, boat launches, diving and snorkeling, which, believe it or not, you can dive in Long Island Sound. You can see about to Tom, but it is a place you can dive. But really connecting that then to how, okay, we've got this one estuary, but how is the broader world changing around us? This is a map from August of this year. So this is what I mean about being able to bring in real-time data and being able to keep exhibits and these spaces current. I'm sure you've all walked through a museum that still has something up from 1994, and it doesn't connect with you. This being August goes, oh, this is what was really happening in this time. And it's something that as we've put this together pedagogically, we've really been trying to make it so that we're keeping our exhibits more flexible, these spaces more flexible, and we're able to then help visualize things as our conservation and our research and our education programs change and grow and evolve. So how do we get after some of the more dire straits things, right? So just looking at what area would be completely submerged with 10 feet of sea level rise, and when our educators go through these maps, they remind folks that water does expand a little bit at temperature. So sea level rise isn't just glaciers melting, but also water expanding. And that the Northeast is a little bit, with how the water moves around the bathtub, we're experiencing a faster sea level rise here than in a number of other coastal areas. So now we go, oh, that's where I live. Oh. I always tell folks, oh, yeah, when I look to buy a house or look to a place to live, I look at the flood maps. But in a very real way, this is starting to impact our economy. So this is where science is starting to meet the economics. And there are coastal communities that are seeing increases in their coastal flood insurance. If you have to pay $7,000 a month on a $300,000 home, it is a very real economic impact on you. And it's starting to crush some coastal communities financially. We as taxpayers, every single time there's coastal flooding, we all pay a little bit. So there's a very real economic outcome to ignoring science, and we're trying to give this a nice ease of interpretation and let people to start to make these conclusions on their own. We don't have to worry about that as much in the Northeast. Having taught in Georgia before this position, I can tell you it's a different group of folks, but at the same time, you can bring people along when you show them what we're looking at. So regardless, looking at some of the causes for this, thinking about what happens just during a storm, when we get up to a Category 4 storm, we all remember what happened during Superstorm Sandy. That wasn't even technically a hurricane at that point. But getting into what the coastal flooding looks like. And if you've had a chance to fiddle around on the NOAA Coastal Explorer website, you can really fiddle around with a lot of these things. Thinking about seawalls and the fact that hardened structure has. We talk a lot about greening the gray, but we're really trying to get this into people's minds. One of the big parts, and I'm sorry I don't have much for New York because the maps we have are from Connecticut, but thinking about how marshes are able to help counteract that in the past and how we've kind of changed that. So the marsh extents now are not nearly what they were 150 years ago. So as we start to do restorations, where should we put those? There's a lot of economic opportunity when it comes to some of our shellfish work that's happening. So some of you may eat blue point oysters. They come from here. They are perfectly safe. And when we think about these different activities, it's really getting folks thinking about their neighbors. So we think about these consistent threads When we try to tie all these different things together, we have a very short amount of time to get after this. But we're trying to remain, give people the chance to interpret nature and to help support nature. And we really are trying to bridge that novice gap and maybe go from unconscious incompetence to maybe conscious incompetence in the time that we're there. And maybe over the course of people becoming members and things like that, we end up getting to a higher level understanding. So with that, thank you very much.